So I'll let y'all know.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Oh, okay. Thank you, sir. That's fine. All right, there we are. Okay, I appreciate it. Thank you, Jeff. All righty, bye. All right, we're up and running.
Okay, so now that we're live on our live stream feed, and it being after 6 o'clock, approximately 6:05, I'd like to call this meeting of the Board of Elections regular monthly meeting August 3rd, 2020 to order. As you can see on your agenda, there's quite a bit for us to go through tonight. So as we get through each and every one of these, if you have questions, I'd like for you to hold them until we're done with each one of the paragraphs. So for section 1, if you have any questions, let's hold them until we get past item number D. Similarly, in section number 2, if you have any questions, let's hold those until we're done with item number B. Does that make sense with everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Not a problem.
That being said, let's move through items A through B. Lynn, if you would take the floor.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
We'll start off with agenda item number 1, which is an update from the August 11th, 2020 nonpartisan runoff. Absentee ballots by mail. As you know, the Georgia Secretary of State has sent out pre-filled absentee ballot applications to all voters for the June election. And any one of those voters who so indicated on their application that they were disabled or over 65 will automatically queued up to receive ballots for the rest of this election cycle. Because of that, even though we've seen a very light turnout during advance voting, we have mailed out around 8,000 ballots by mail for this election. So there's been a lot of activity. Some of these numbers I'm giving you now were updated through the close of business today. The report that you received via email was through Friday, so you'll see that those numbers have changed a little bit. So we have sent out actually 7,600 ballots through mail, and of that, around 3,900 have come back to us, voted ballots, and those have been approved and accepted and are ready calculated. As far as advance voting goes, through the close of business, nearly the close of business today, we've had a little over 600 people vote in total. We have the numbers in from the advance voting sites for today yet because they didn't close until 6, and so those numbers we don't have quite yet. But when the last report that I ran, which was about 5:45, we had just slightly over 600 people that had voted during advance voting so far. And that would be cumulative from when we started 3 weeks ago to where we are today.
Yes.
Good.
Early absentee ballot processing. We are set to begin early processing of the absentee ballots this Wednesday, August the 5th, and Thursday, August the 6th. We'll work from 10 o'clock until 5 o'clock daily on those 2 days to process ballots. I expect right now we have around 3,900 ballots that have been returned. That may increase by several hundred by the time that day gets here. But certainly having those 2 days should give us ample time to finish everything we have on hand. When I think back to the June election, we had 23,000 ballots to open up, and it took us 5 business days plus to get that done. So with only 4,000 ballots to open up, we should be able to get those done in time. And then any that are left, for instance, any that we pick up like in the evening at 7 p.m. from the drop box, we can work them out ultimately and ideally. We could get those open on election night and go ahead and get those scanned as well. But if not, there may be some odds and ends of things that we'll need to scan at the point in time that we scan the provisional ballots that we decide on. So we'll just kind of have to see how that goes. But we'll certainly try to get as many as possible.
I'm having a little problem hearing you, Lynn.
Okay.
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know. How about now? Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. The drop boxes have been used some with this election, but they've not been used a whole lot. So I wouldn't be surprised if at the end of, it was 7 p.m. when we do our final pickup, we may have 50 or so ballots in total, which is not an unreasonable number to think that we might can get through those on election night and go ahead and get those counted and scanned in. That would, ideally, that we can work that out.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of the absentee ballot drop boxes, through the close of on Friday, we had approximately 200 ballots picked up from those boxes. That's over the 3-week period of time that we've had it open. So there were many days during that time. The municipal building box has been pretty popular the whole time.
Yes.
At Warren Road and Brigham and Diamond Lakes were, we might have 2 or 3 a day that were in each of those boxes, sometimes maybe 10. So they've not been used very much. Now we did see when we picked up this morning, there had been a little bit of activity yesterday, between yesterday and today, and so that was good. But nevertheless, the box was called. It them out there at convenience, and I'm sure in November we won't be able to empty them enough times during the day. So. And that's really all I have to report on the August election. And I'll just throw in there that poll workers have all been trained. Feedback from some. Are you?
Yeah, I don't have any idea where we're getting an audio issue, but we are having a bit of an audio issue here.
Yes.
Okay. Well,
Yes, we are.
Well, I'll just carry on and let me know if you need me to repeat something. I'll be glad to do that.
No problem.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I have a question
Yes.
on this first section, please.
Okay.
Okay. Lynn, you had said that initially when we registered for mail-in ballots, that if we were disabled or over 65, that it would, you said it would be automatic for the season. Is this including November, or is this just for this election now?
No, that includes November, as well as if we have a runoff in December and the runoff that we will certainly have in January. So it's for the whole complete cycle.
Oh, all right. Because I've been getting questions and I wasn't sure. And I said, well, we're meeting Monday and I'll make sure to ask. Okay. So,
Okay. Yeah. So
thank you. So
it takes them through the whole year. Now that, the one thing that has been, people have found a little bit confusing is because we had so many people voting by absentee in June that had never voted by absentee before, they just weren't completely familiar with the end. And so we had several instances, friends of mine that called, their one spouse together was over 65 and got a ballot for the runoff, but the other spouse was not yet 65, nor were they disabled, and they didn't get a ballot. And so there's been some, just some confusion like that. But for the most part.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions for section 1?
No.
Being none, let's move on to section number 2, an update on the November 3rd, 2020 general election, sections A and B. Lynn?
Okay. I have sections A and B, and then I have a couple of other things that I've tucked in there too. So I'll just roll through the end and then be glad to take any questions.
Sounds good.
Board of Education, the qualifying period for the Board of Education is set to begin on Monday, August the 17th. We have seats 1, 4, 5, 8, and 10 that are up for election this year. So that qualifying period opens on a Monday on the 17th of August at 9:00 a.m. and will close at 12 noon on the following Friday, August the 21st. So that is that's all set up. One thing I wanted to make you aware of is the idea of post-election auditing. You might recall that in 2018, there was a big legislative packet that was passed, all kinds of election reforms. And one of the things that's now required, beginning with this November's election, is that each county in Georgia perform some type of post-election but pre-certification audit. So sometime after the election, but before we certify. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up on it. I don't know exactly what this audit will look like yet. There are a community of local election officials and state officials that are working together to develop some type of process that will work well for counties without being too onerous in November. So as you might have guessed immediately or ascertained immediately, if we do an election if we do an audit that's post-election but pre-certification, that's a short window of time, and it's a window of time during which we are normally very, very busy with provisional ballots and other things, particularly in a November election. So, but we're going to have to figure out a way to do it because it's written into law and whatever. Now, there are different things that have been talked about. There is talk of an audit called a risk limiting audit, which eventually everyone in the whole state of Georgia will be moving to by 2024. But this election, we're required to do some type of audit, which could be as simple as a randomly selected precinct or two in each county being asked to hand count ballots for a randomly selected office that appears somewhere on the ballot. And so, most offices in the general election, there are two candidates that run in most instances. And so you just take them and sort them out into stacks, count them up, count those paper ballots up by hand, compare them to what the machine totals were, and then that would be your audit to make sure that the machines were counting properly. So moving forward, I think we'll have something a little more sophisticated for that than that. But right now we're kind of dipping our toe in and trying to figure out a reasonable way to do it for November. So I'll keep you posted. The working group is meeting this Thursday to begin a dialogue on how rules can be developed to help us implement that statewide. So I'll keep you posted on that. It's a pretty big deal in Georgia. We've never been required to do it as an election community, so it's a big step for us, I think.
Okay.
I also want to make you aware in that same House Bill 316 that provides for these post-election pre-certification audits. It also authorized the state of Georgia to become a member of the Election Registration Information, Electronic Registration Information Center, and better known as ERIC is kind of a lingo if you hear any of your colleagues talking about it around the state. But basically, there are 30 states plus Washington, D.C., who are all members of this group. And the states give this group center voter registration information, and the center compares it across state boundaries to check for duplicate registration and things like that. And all of our neighbors, by the way, in the Southeast are members. So it's good that we can, compare and make sure that we've got a clean list. One of the things that they are able to do, one of the things that ERIC is able to do for counties and that our Secretary of State is going to do this September, is somehow they can identify all citizens in your jurisdiction who are eligible to register to vote, but who are not registered to vote. Eligible but registered, EBU. There's an acronym for everything, so that's the one for that group of people, EBU. Eligible but unregistered. And Secretary of State Raffensperger plans to send all those individuals a mailer of some type with an invitation to register to vote that would also include a voter registration application. And so those, I'll know more about that later on this week. There are more meetings. There's a meeting on this Wednesday, I think, to get more details about that. So I'll keep you posted on that, but it's coming, and I worried that the mailing might get out before we were together again as a board, and so I wanted to give you a heads up that that's out there on the Secretary's agenda. They'll be moving forward with that just a little bit later this fall. And that's all I have for November for now. I'll be glad to take any questions.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. May I have to speak?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The applications for people who are not disabled or over 65, when will they come out in the mail for them to apply for November?
Well, right now, these are things that I do know about that. We're going to talk about that a little bit later in our meeting. It's on the agenda for another item, but I will tell you that the Secretary of State has no plans to send those applications back out statewide like he did prior to June. Now,
Oh,
anyone who's in that rollover status, theirs automatically carries forward. So that's about 12,000 of the 30,000 that we sent out here in Richmond County were on that
okay.
rollover list. But the other individuals would need to reapply somehow to get a ballot.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank
And
you.
applications are available right now. We're getting them in every day. So if they're available, and anyone
Mr. Chairman,
anyone who wants an application who doesn't have one should contact our office or look on our website. The applications are out there, fairly available.
All right then. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Terrence.
yeah, I just wanted to clarify. So if people want the absentee ballot or the early voting ballot, they just need to they can go ahead and let the office know now, right?
That's right, Mr. Dick.
Okay.
Now people that are, with the exception of those 11 to 12,000 that are on our rollover list, those individuals,
Okay.
even though they may have received a ballot by mail for June, they will need to reapply somehow, some way for November. It's not an automatic thing that we have in the state of Georgia. You have to reapply unless you fit that special category of voters that we talked about earlier. So for those people who vote absentee all the time, this is nothing new. They know the deal, but we know we have a lot of first-time voters using this service, but for the first time, so there is an educational component to that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just wanted to know because I've got a number of seniors who probably or seniors who have not voted by absentee before, and we want to make sure they are aware they can go ahead and make that call now. Okay.
Now.
Yeah, well, they can. Now, Terrence, it's more than just a call. They would need to get a form to fill out and sign.
Well, I'm saying they can request it now. That they need to request it now. Yeah.
They could request a form now, and all you all that are party affiliated, keep in mind that absentee ballot applications, they're available on the Secretary of State's website, also on our website. There's nothing wrong or inappropriate whatsoever about reproducing those applications and disseminating them in any way that you would like to do so. When those applications come back to us, we're going to verify signatures on them and make sure that everything is on the up and up with that application before we send a ballot out to the person. So there's a security check involved in there. But step one is getting the application in the first place.
Okay, got it.
Any additional questions?
No.
No, sir. No.
Lynn, let's press ahead to Blythe.
Yes, sir. So it was notified last week, excuse me, that a city council person in the city of Blythe has resigned his seat because he has relocated out of the city limits of Blythe.
Mm-hmm.
And we were, boy, you talk about just being in the nick of time. This Wednesday is the last day that the ad could be published to call for this special election in November and have the election in November. So it really, everything is just barely we're able to fit it to the calendar. And of course, it all depends upon the board's motion to issue the call for the election. So let me move on and tell you a little bit about it, and then we can go from there. So as I say, on Friday, July the 31st, Brent Weir, who was a city council member in the city of Blythe, resigned his seat. Mr. Weir was first elected in 2019 for a 4-year term. The special election that we would hold would be for his unexpired term, expiring in 2023.
Okay.
The suggested qualifying period would be similar to that of the Board of Education. So it would start on Monday, August the 17th and run 2.5 days, which is the norm for special elections. It would run 2.5 days through Wednesday at 12 noon on Wednesday the 19th. Now, qualifying for this election takes place in the city of Blythe. The city clerk out there handles all the qualifying, accepts the fees and that kind of stuff.
Okay.
The voter registration deadline would be the same as the is that for the November 3rd election. So the voter registration deadline was later this afternoon, or earlier this afternoon, I should say, the Blythe City Council met and actually accepted the letter of resignation and issued a resolution to the Board of Elections asking the board to issue the call for the special election to be conducted on November 3rd. I sent that resolution to you all this afternoon, later on this afternoon. I've read it over. It looks very much in order. And so with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
No questions.
There being no questions, we do need to take action as far as entertaining a motion to issue the call.
We need to do that now. I know that it was further on down the line, but I would move that we issue the call for the special election to replace the council person for the city of Blythe.
I second that.
Second. Okay.
Been properly moved and seconded to issue the call for the special election in Blythe. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Lynn, we can continue.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is the discussion of the CARES Act funding, and I'd like to offer a little bit of background on that. The city of Augusta recently received some funding under the CARES Act. Now, the CARES Act is the Coronavirus Relief Act that set forth by Congress. It is the same funding that the Georgia Secretary of State's office used to send out pre-filled applications to pre-filled absentee ballot applications to voters. That funding was also used to provide grants to counties for the establishment of absentee ballot drop boxes and for providing personal protective equipment to citizens for election-related matters. It's something that elections easily fall under. And so I have gone through and prepared a document of items that I think would be great for us to do, possible for us to do, and likely be funded under using the CARES Act funds without going to the general fund to do that. And so I'd like to go through these things and then be glad to discuss anything that anyone wants to discuss, and we can go from there. So, Mr. Chair, if it's all right, I'll just start going down the document. Okay, and you should have a copy of this in your documents. The first item, we talked earlier about the fact that the Georgia Secretary of State has opted to not send out pre-filled absentee ballot applications to voters. We've contacted a local vendor with whom the city of Augusta has an existing contract. It's the same vendor that does the utility bills and tax mailings, to develop a pre-filled absentee ballot application form for our voters. Now, they have the ability to suppress applications from being sent to voters who are on the rollover list, as an example. They don't need an application. In fact, it would be confusing for them to get an application and then a ballot in the mail. So they say they have the ability to do that. The cost for doing that, for the estimated 125,000 voters that would be involved, is the total cost would have an impact of around $100,000. So it would be $75,000, about 50 cents each to send the mailers out, and then an additional $25,000 would be requested under the CARES Act funding to provide personnel to accommodate what would most certainly be the increased number of absentee ballots that would then come back into our office, and the applications that would come in to be processed. So that's one thing. Another thing, and these would be reimbursements. The things I'm going through now would be reimbursements from items that we spent during the June election that weren't budgeted when we prepared our budget back in June of 2019. And those items would be $25,000 for verifying and issuing those 30,000 ballots that we sent out with the absentee ballot applications. Personnel for verifying the voted absentee ballots that came back in. Personnel required to open all those ballots and get them ready for processing. Hazard pay for poll workers. The personal protective equipment that we purchased as a county, that's also a reimbursable expense. Now you'll see that I have to the negative there the $3,000, and that represents the grant that we applied for through the Secretary of State's office. That was the maximum allowable county match grant. So we certainly met that match, and we expect to get that check here soon. It's all been approved. We just haven't got the check yet. So the total reimbursables from the June election comes in at $75,440. Moving down to August, it's projected that the early opening of the absentee ballots will cost us around $3,000. The hazard pay for poll workers will be about $8,400. Personal protective equipment, we're in pretty good shape from what we purchased in June, but we have had to buy a few things, about $250. So total reimbursables from the August election is $11,650. The absentee ballot drop boxes, as I mentioned earlier, that's a cost that can be funded under this CARES Act grant. Now, as I did earlier with the personal protective equipment, I subtracted $3,000 from that line item to represent the $3,000 grant received from the Secretary of State's office to offset the cost of those drop boxes. So that leaves $7,233. Electronic letter openers. We have all these ballots. Sherry, you were out there a lot while we were slitting those ballots. The idea with this is that we purchased 8 tabletop electronic letter openers. One will be assigned to each one of our 3-person teams that are opening up ballots. Instead of them having to manually open those things, I think it'll save us a lot of time, and it's certainly something that's covered under the CARES Act funding. So the total funding request from round 1 of the CARES Act is $208,730, and that includes all those things that we just talked about, including the absentee ballot, pre-filled absentee ballot applications by mail, the June COVID expenses, the August COVID-related expenses, the absentee ballot drop boxes, and the electronic letter openers. Now, this grant funding comes in several different rounds, and so those amounts that we just talked about would be requested out of the round 1 funding. Then out of round 2, got 2 different categories of stuff. The first one is an estimate of what we think we're going to spend for COVID-related matters for the November election, and that would include extra money for ballot printing over what we had budgeted for November. Extra postage, because the Secretary of State's office won't be mailing absentee ballots out to voters for November like they did for June. So we'll have to absorb that cost. The counties will have to absorb that cost. Personnel for verifying applications and issuing absentee ballots, that's $18,000. Personnel for verifying the voted absentee ballots, $27,000. Personnel for opening the absentee ballots, $8,500. Hazard pay for poll workers, $18,000. Personal protective equipment would be another $10,000. So the total request to apply towards our November election would be $117,000. Lastly, we are 95% certain that we have an opportunity to use the Bell Auditorium for advanced voting for the November election. The Coliseum Authority has offered that to us at no charge, and the Marshal's Department has offered to provide security to us at no charge. And so our primary expenses would be to pay the people to work up there 3 weeks. Now, the idea is that we would open up the Bell Auditorium instead of opening up down here in the municipal building. In using the Bell Auditorium, we have enough equipment that we could more than double the amount of voting units that are available. In the Beasley room, we're pretty much maxed out at 20 in there. And once you apply social distancing to it, it's a lower number than that. Quite frankly, it's more like 12 voting units. So if we can move, if things work out and we can move to the Bell Auditorium, that gives us a great airy space to put everyone in. And I'm sure that we have enough voting equipment to put 45, if not 50 voting machines down there. And we have enough scanners to put 3 or 4 scanners down there at the door. And we have enough electronic poll pads to put more poll pads there for check-in stations for voters that come in. We just found out last week that the Coliseum Authority was going to waive their fees. Initially, when we first started talking about this a month or so ago, there was a utility fee that was associated, a daily usage fee for utilities. But as I say, just last week, I was contacted by the chairperson of the Coliseum Authority to say that it would be their pleasure to waive all fees. So that was about $16,000 or $17,000 that we would not have to pay. Now there is the potential of a scheduling conflict with the Bell Auditorium that falls right in the middle of advanced voting, prime time advanced voting, and that would be a deal changer if we can't get this rescheduled. We're working on it now, and I can't say 100% that it will happen. But what I'd like to do is, after we finish our discussion, whatever items that the board is comfortable with moving forward under the CARES Act funding, including voting at the Bell Auditorium, is to get a motion for the staff to proceed with making arrangements contingent upon the funding coming through. The Augusta Commission, I understand, is going to talk about some of this stuff tomorrow. So I think by the end of the week, we may have even a few more answers. But if we're going to do things like do the pre-filled absentee applications and offer up advanced voting at the Bell Auditorium, in my opinion, the sooner we can let the public know, the better. They'll know what to expect. And with that, Mr. Chair, I'll be glad to take any questions or provide any more information.
Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Lynn, have you already submitted these requests to the commission under the CARES Act?
I have, yes.
Okay.
And of course, it was, contingent upon the board's approval of it, but we needed to go ahead and get it in since the funding, I think, just came through late last week, and so everything's been kind of hurried, it seems. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
If there's not going to be much more further discussion on this, I think we should go ahead and move to go ahead and give Mrs. Bailey what she needs to get the facility, Bell Auditorium, ready for the November election, which is going to be massive. And we'll hopefully there'll be enough money in the CARES Act to cover it, or whatever funds there are available. Because again, this is going to be a very large undertaking, and we got to have the space. So
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I think we don't have a choice. So whenever you're ready, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion on that.
Is there any further discussion before we entertain the motion?
No, sir.
Question as to, is the motion going to include the funding as requested in round 1 and the funding as requested in round 2, with the caveat that we're moving ahead to use Bell Auditorium, and if something that would be the contingency that we're going to move ahead for that?
Actually, Attorney, I'm just going to say that if the funds are in fact available for us to do that, whether it's round 1 or round 2, that we would just begin the preparation for that, because I think that's the prudent thing to do, so that we can, so that we don't have to be caught unawares later. And so that whatever preparations need to be made can go ahead and be made. And if we can't, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it.
So what I'm hearing is a desire to make a motion, but I don't hear a motion yet.
Yes.
Okay, the motion, Mr. Chairman, is that we empower the executive director to begin the whatever facilitations or whatever she may need to go before the city and the county to request those permission and if available funds to begin for us to begin opening up Ballot Auditorium as our early voting site.
I'm going to have to disagree with that, because I think what we need to do is make sure that in the motion we ask under the CARES Act that under round one, that we be reimbursed for all expenses, and under round two, that we all the expenses be that we're requesting plus the Bell Auditorium, but I feel uncomfortable just limiting it to the Bell. I think we need to make sure that we include everything. For.
Without objection, Terrence, do you accept that as an amendment to your motion?
I have no objection, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
There's a motion on the floor.
I would second as amended.
Motion has been seconded as amended. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Sherry.
Just want to make sure we get all the money we can, Terrence.
Yes.
I hear you. I'm in no disagreement. I'm in no disagreement.
Well,
Okay, and we all need help sometimes.
I'll keep you guys updated moving forward on how the round one and round two funding requests go. We'll see. But as I say, we are now at least poised that should the funding become available, we can take these plans that have been laid and implement them without any further delay, since the board has supported the initiatives provided for in round one and round two. So that's a great position for us to be in. So thank y'all very much for your support with that.
All right. Any further discussion on items?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, if I could just clarify what I had, the reason why I went forward is because I did not want to hold up Ms. Bailey to be able to, get into place what she needed. True, we're always going to have funding issues from time to time, and so that's why I was saying that if we can, then we will. But if we can't, then we'll have to look at something else. But I appreciate Attorney Barnes, her friendly motion to make that change. So I certainly appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, board members, for your action on that item. Let's move on to a discussion of the 2021 budget. Lynn?
Well, just a quick update. We're in the process now, of getting our budget submission prepared. It's basically, I can't say that I call it a flat budget, because it'll be a huge decrease in our budget. So we'll all the election expenses will come off. Everything else stays flat as far as basic operation salaries, positions, and whatnot. So once we will have that into the finance department by the end of the week. I will make sure to copy all you guys when we get it finished up, and we can go from there.
Lynn, I would ask that as part of the budget for 2021, there be a line item where we can begin to perhaps maybe stockpile some PPE for possible future issues similar to what we've experienced this year. Not necessarily reproducing everything that we have, but to have some stockpile of some of the items that you know that may or may not be necessary moving forward in our. I do think that there is a new norm where people are going to expect to have certain things like hand sanitizers and those types of things when they go to vote, regardless of the presence of COVID or any other issue. I do think that there's going to be an expectation or a general expectation for additional protocols to be in place, especially from boards like ours. So if you could add that without it being burdensome on on the budget, it would be great to kind of have that as a rolling need and to start to prepare to have a stockpile of some of those things that we're going to need moving forward.
Sure, I think that's a good idea. I mean, we know that we will have a runoff, possibly a runoff in December, depending on, it's possible some of those Board of Education seats may generate a runoff. We're certain that there'll be a runoff in January with the U.S. Senate race. We have 21.
That's correct.
Right? So, you got to figure there's going to be a runoff there. And then we know we have the City of Augusta 1% sales tax coming up in March. So, when I said a flat budget, I don't mean to imply that next year will be easy, because we get off to a pretty quick start in 2021. And Chairman, your point is well taken. I think a good stockpile of PPE is very appropriate and very much in order.
Any other questions or comments or anything on the discussion of the 2021 budget? Any questions at all for Lynn at this point?
No.
Mm-mm.
Hearing none, is there any old business for the good of the board?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I'll say under old business is just to remind the board members that we did set our certification meeting for August the 19th. We will, get together. Those of us who can make themselves available will get together Tuesday, August the 11th to get the election evening wrapped up, and then we'll get together for our certification meeting the following Wednesday on August the 19th for our certification meeting and to look at provisional ballot.
Any questions for Lynn on that item in old business?
We're in old business. Okay. I'm sorry. Go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this would be my first certification. Is this something that I need to be there in person?
I think that that's a question that we can address off air, where we could have a discussion.
Yes, sir.
Simply because your personal desire for your personal safety is one that we all want to hold as your personal business, and so let's have that conversation outside of a public forum, if you don't mind.
That's fine. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I have a question, and it's probably not old business, but I would like the specific address of the warehouse. I have some people that are going to be opening the absentee ballots, and they keep asking for the address, and I keep telling them it's on Lumpkin Road, but if I could have a specific address,
Sure.
I would appreciate it.
It's 2029 Lumpkin Road.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Sherry, I can tell you personally that is an address that I've searched for early on when I was added to this board, and it was one of those addresses that always slipped my mind. So I appreciate you doing that.
Well, I've got a couple of new people that are coming, and that was the first thing they said. I need the address to put in the GPS, and I said, I'll get it. I call you Tuesday.
The building is actually numbered now also.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful.
Initially, when I first started looking for it, it was not. So
No, that's a new thing.
Okay, all right. That's our old business. Is there any new business for the good of the board?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to pass on to the board a recommendation that had been made to me some months ago. I don't know if I shared it with the board, and if I did, I do apologize for bringing this under new business. But someone had recommended that that, as you know, we have the area where we have guests, and a lot of people are always very interested in how we do things. and the like. And some friends of mine were traveling out of state, and they noticed where in Seattle, Washington, they have an actual webcam when votes are being counted, even the early votes are being counted. So, and I'm not saying that we would have the money in our budget this time, but going forward, maybe we could have a subcommittee or a board discussion to discuss how we can make our process more transparent to the public within the boundaries of privacy and protecting the sanctity of the vote. But I think that, I think this would be an excellent ongoing civic lesson for the community if they felt there was a part of it or somewhere they could tune in and actually see democracy being done. So I'm hoping that we would consider that in the future. So,
well,
yeah.
I think that, recently we have been communicating amongst ourselves about a policy which included the taking of pictures and whatnot when it comes to our elections and whatnot. I would assume that putting a exploratory committee together and having that exploratory committee bring their information to the board. Terrence, if you'd like to pick a couple of team members to help you with that, and then get with Lynn and get an agenda item for you to give us that report on how it's done and how it would benefit the Board of Election and obviously the citizenry and the electorate. I wouldn't have a problem with an exploratory committee to bring information forward on that. Lynn,
thank you so much.
Lynn,
go ahead.
Lynn, do you have any insight into that? Or are you familiar with anything like that within the state of Georgia? And as it stands right now, is there anything in the state of Georgia that would preclude us from having such a exploratory committee?
Well, not from having an exploratory committee, but perhaps from installing the webcam, simply because in the tabulation center, it's against the law to have any, when we're doing the early slitting process anyway, it's against the law to have any type of recording device at all. We take up cell phones at the door and all that kind of thing. So, but those are things that could be talked about in committee, and we could certainly look at the law to identify the differences between what happens pre-election and what happens once the polls are closed and things are a little more open at that point, and how we can incorporate some of those things. I think it would be a very good conversation to have.
Terrence, are you willing to head up that exploratory committee?
Oh, absolutely. And as I said, so long as and we'll have to discuss the timeline because, of course, we got a lot going on. So definitely, I would be glad. And anybody who's interested, please, you know how to contact me or contact Lynn, and I'd be more than glad to prepare to, host such a meeting. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. With the board's permission, of course.
When you set your committee members, if you're going to have meetings, I would like to be invited to those meetings.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. Is that I think as chair, you're ex officio, you and the vice chair, I guess, are ex officio anyway. So, yeah.
Is there any additional new business for the good of the board? I want to thank you all for being here. I want to thank you for your participation today. I want to thank Terrence for bringing that bit of thought process about voter and the process being transparent. I know that that's kind of one of those words that may or may not necessarily be construed as a positive word in our setting as it stands right now, but the transparency that exists within the city and county of Richmond County and Augusta, Georgia, I do believe that on the surface, the areas where we allow individuals to view what we do it may or may not be adequate for some, but has through the years been adequate. Anything that we do additional to that as a result of this exploratory committee, just know that we're going to go about it in such a way that we do our due diligence to make sure that we protect the sanctity of the vote, as Terrence so eloquently said earlier tonight. But we do want to make sure that we stay, quote unquote, with the times. And so if there are ways for us to provide a civic lesson, if you will, for those individuals who are interested in how things are done, then I'm all for that. Again, I'd like to thank all of you for being here tonight. And I want to thank all those who are viewing us live on the streaming video at this point. There being no further new business for the board, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded that we adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you. Lynn, did you have something before we
I was
close?
just gonna say, we'll see everyone next Tuesday.
Fantastic.
Those who plan to attend out at the warehouse.
Thank you all.
Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to it. Y'all take care. Good night, everybody. Thanks.
Bye,
Good
y'all.
night.
Good night.